Here we go.
Okay.
We're here together, Ron. We're going to tell stories and talk about Uganda.
Sounds fun.
So you've invited me. I'm privileged to be here. I should say my name. My name is Tracy, and we work together. I'm a part of Mission Increase, but you've welcomed me into the Uganda family, and I'm so grateful.
We're grateful, very grateful. Definitely.
So, Ron, here's where I'm thinking we can start today. I have often heard you say these words: I wish you could go to Uganda with me.
Yes.
But since I haven't been there yet, and probably some of our listeners haven't been there with you yet, I'm wondering, can you bring Uganda here in story form? Can you tell us a story about what you've experienced in Uganda?
I'll try. There's several ways you can go. Since I started going to Uganda in 2006, I've taken about 250 people there. But far more than that, have heard what we're doing and are interested and want to be part of what we're doing there, what God is doing. And so you don't have to go. You can pray. You can, provide gifts. You can give us advice, serve on one of our volunteer teams. There's lots of ways to go. But it's more fun to get the visa, jump on the plane. I'll travel all night, try to stay awake and get to the hotel, and then travel across the country 8 hours to this remote place on God's green earth that's pretty much forgotten except by a few people. So
tell me more. What would I see if I took that journey with you? What would I see? What are the stories that I would experience?
Well, when you leave Entebbe, which is where the airport is, you're going to see a third world country. You're going to see a lot of shops, a lot of chaos. Someone said there's 1 million motorcycles just in Kampala, and I don't doubt that. When you get out of town and start going west, you'll start seeing beautiful scenery. It's just a beautiful country. They used to call it the Pearl of Africa, and it's just so, lush and beautiful. And when you get over toward the west, you'll see tea plantations that are just photogenic, and they're just something out of a postcard or a calendar page or something. And then when you get to Fort Portal, which is now a city, they have official designations, and it's recently become a city, then you start winding around the mountains to where we work. And when I first went there in 2006 with my daughter, it took all day from Fort Portal to go about 75 miles, and it was a treacherous, very unforgiving road. You had to be very patient and determined to get there. Now it's a paved road, but it's still 15-mile-an-hour corners, and everyone wants to stop and take photos of the beautiful scenery. The mountains go up to 16,700 feet with year-round snow, and it's just hard to believe that's in near the equator in Africa. And when you get down to where we work, a little town called Bundibujo. Bundibujo is a town. It's also a district. There are 350,000 people in the district, and there are 600 villages. Many of them are up in the mountains. And when we first started Uganda, we decided we would go to the district that was one of the most difficult in Uganda. And when we got there, we would go to the villages that are the most difficult, where the people have the biggest challenges. And so we went off the tarmac road up into the hills, and we adopted villages up there where people had never been to a doctor. If they got sick, they couldn't get to a clinic, and their lives were in danger. So that's where we work. And you feel like when you get out of the van, we have 3 vehicles now, but when you get out of one of our vehicles in the village, you feel like you've just been deposited into a different time. It's a time machine. But the people are just so wonderfully appreciative of everything you do. They're so warm. They're so thankful. They're hopeful, when they realize that our only objective in being there is to try to help them. So anyway, that's what you would see.
So I know that providing medical care is one of the core tenets of what you do in these villages. Can you tell me a story about a person that you've cared for? Their life, I'm sure, was dramatically changed because of the medical care they received through Arganda.
Yes. Well, we've done surgeries for over 60 people who would have died or been permanently crippled without it. And I don't think anyone else is doing it, but it's impossible for them. And so when there's a child with some debilitating problem or disease, they're just shunned and there's no hope for them. But our very first case was a lady named Sabrina. And if this were a video podcast, I would show you a picture of her. She had a growth on the side of her face almost as big as her head and was in terrible discomfort and was socially humiliated. And she came to one of our first clinics, and our clinic has wheels, so the team rolled up in the village, and she asked, do you think you could help me? And the answer is, yeah, we'll try, and we were just getting started, and I showed pictures to a couple of our board members, and this one lady just rose up with her fist in the air and said, we're going to help her. And, well, we don't know what it's going to cost yet. It doesn't matter.
We're going to do it anyway.
So anyway,
That's
long
great.
story short, we paid for her surgery, and we actually took two ladies at the same time. Sabrina was one, and then another lady had a growth on her throat. And so they went together, and we always have them on a bus with one of our staff, so they go with them to the hospital, and the hospital knows they're coming, and we arrange all that and then paid for surgery. And boy, they came out of the surgery, both of them, and were just great, and just, the big lump is gone, and Sabrina came back to her village, and she said, I feel beautiful.
Wow.
And every time I go there now, she runs to me and hugs me, and, the only part I have is just the joy of getting the pictures first, and that, but really it's our team there, it's our donors, but she hugs me, I guess, on the face with the place, so, and she won't let me go. And recently when we were there, I asked Vincent, our ministry coordinator, could we take Sabrina and Agnes to a restaurant? And he's like, yeah, I guess. And they'd never been to a restaurant, and in Bundi Bujo, there's no eating establishments that we would call a restaurant, but there are places where someone else prepares the food, and it's always done over an open fire behind the place. So it's not quite what we're used to, but they'd never been to one. So we took Sabrina and Agnes and then a few of our team and went to a restaurant and told them, order anything you want. Well, a big plate of rice and beans or rice and beef or rice and chicken or rice and whatever is $3 or $4, but for them, they couldn't have ever done it. And so they ate a full meal, and we're winding down, and I said, anything else? Would you like anything at all? Let us know. And Sabrina meekly said, would it be okay if I asked for an apple?
Oh, my.
And I said, yeah, let's see if they have an apple, So we called the waiter over, and yeah, they brought her an apple, and she held it in her hand like it was precious. And I guess apples don't really grow there. They bring them in from somewhere else. And she had her first apple. And then it dawned on me, the sun's going down and we're a ways from the village. And so, do you need a ride back home? And they said, oh, we'll walk. We're used to walking. Oh, no, we have a vehicle. We'll take you back. And then I said, Agnes' husband was back in the village. And I said, when you get back to the village, will you have to prepare food for your husband? She said, yes. And it's already dark, and she's going to gather wood and build a fire. And I said, well, would he like some of this food? Yeah, maybe. I said, tell us what he would like, and, we can wrap it up and take it to him. You won't have to. And
take out.
Take out. She had the biggest smile. I mean, it's just so simple to bring joy to people's lives, And, we love them, and they know it. We wish we could do more, but those little acts of kindness go so far. And of course, word spreads in the village, and Arganda loves people, and they don't ask for anything from us. They're just trying to help us, and before long, the next village wants us to come, and we can't keep up, of course. But right now, we're in 10 villages. Started with 3. We're in 10 villages with about 12,000 people total.
Well, I want to go back to something that you said about Sabrina and her story, because it's easy to see that you provided medical care that changed her life. But I heard you also say, we didn't just pay for this surgery and send her to the hospital on her own. Our team went with her. And then you invited her to dinner. I don't know why you did that. Was it a celebration? Was it because now she felt beautiful and she'd never been to this kind of eating experience? But both of those things were about the ministry of presence.
Yes.
And you're still in relationship with Sabrina. That's striking to me too. Mm-hmm. So tell me more. Tell me more about that ministry of presence, how you're all involved in each other's lives.
Well, another story that's still unfolding is we paid for a little girl's surgery who was severely crippled. And the doctors, this was just last month, and the doctors thought they could save her leg. And so there's a 4-stage surgery, which our doctor here in the U.S. was explaining how it works and so on. And so we were optimistic and hopeful, but when they got in there, it was so terribly diseased they couldn't save her leg. And we just were like, that's not okay. You've got to, I mean, there has to be a way. And, but there wasn't. And they had to amputate. So, we're so sad about that. And so I was sharing with our Bible study group about this story. And somebody said, well, let's buy her a really nice soft doll, an African doll. And they went on Amazon and bought this beautiful doll, and then 2 of them have gotten together and they've made 3 dresses for the little girl whose name is Adinas and 3 matching dresses for the little doll. And they're working on them right now, and when I go to Uganda in a few weeks, I'm going to take that doll on their behalf and the little dresses and present it to her. And everyone we meet, we wish, we call our ministry Our Uganda because it's not you. We don't see them that way. We see them as our, and we wish we could help every single person. But once in a while, there's someone special like that. Everyone's special, but you know what I'm saying? She loses her leg, a little kid. She's barely 3 or 4 years old. And how's she going to navigate that? And I'll tell this story too. Connected with it is we got a donation check from someone I'd never heard of, but one of our current donors had just talked to somebody about this little girl, and they sent a check for several $1,000s and said, we don't need a receipt. We don't want to be on your mailing list. We just heard about this girl and want to help. And so we were thankful, and I had his address, so I sent him a note, and, in a text and so on, and said, we won't add you to the list and stuff, but thank you. And then it was about 3 weeks later, right after the little girl's leg was amputated, that my phone rang, and I didn't recognize the number, so it's probably some, guy wants to sell siding or something. But I answered it, and it was the same guy. He said, hey, my name is, and gave his name, and he said, we heard the little girl had to have her leg cut off. We're so sorry. And please keep track of any expenses to help this girl from now on. She's going to need a prosthesis. She's going to need all kinds of medical care. Please keep track of that. And when you know the expenses, let us know, and we'll cover it.
Praise God.
It's just amazing. So
you're giving people an opportunity to partner with you and change lives. And some of that's coming because you're telling the story.
Yeah. So the longer we go, the more people we can help. And that's what we're all about. And
So I want to pivot a little bit, if we could, because you mentioned Vincent. Vincent is a part of your staff. I'd love to hear some of Vincent's story. Can you tell me how he came to work with you?
Yeah. At one point, our board started keeping a document of all the miracles, and we're not keeping up because there's so many of them, but early was how we connected with Vincent. And when we first bought a vehicle, which we bought in Japan and had shipped over to Uganda, I went over with a friend to take delivery of it, and we stocked it with everything that doctors told us we'd need. And then we drove out to Bundibujo to interview people. And someone had recommended Vincent. We never heard of Vincent, and he didn't know anything about Uganda because it didn't exist, But we interviewed several people, and one was Vincent, and we felt very strongly that he was a man of character and, discipline and whatever, all the things you look for. So we hired him. And when we found out a little bit of his story over time, when he was a boy living in a mud and sticks hut barefoot in a village called Sarakiambia, he was eating fish one evening, and the fish bone got caught in his throat, and he couldn't get it out, and he could hardly breathe. He was choking and crying, and his parents couldn't help him, and they were all desperate, and there's no hospital or clinic anywhere near, and men literally carried him on their back to a clinic, and they got him there and laid him in a bed, and they tried to help him, and nobody could get it out, and it looked like he was going to die. And he cried out to God and said, if you save my life, I'll become a doctor, and I'll go back to my village and try to help other people. And the fishbone popped out.
Wow. Ask and you shall receive.
Oh, man, it's amazing. So he disciplined his whole life then to try to become a doctor. And, he had nothing. He's taken me to his hut to show me where he grew up. It's just in ultra poverty. But he did his best. He got little jobs. He talked to people, and someone offered to help. And anyway, he ended up becoming a medical clinical officer, which is it's like a nurse practitioner here. They can prescribe and they can do minor surgeries, but not quite a doctor. But he got done and had no job. There are 47 million people in Uganda and 10 million jobs. And so even if you have a college degree, you don't usually get a job. He didn't have a job, so he went back to Sarakiambia and just tried to help people, just to visit them and try to teach them nutrition. And he wasn't getting paid, barely surviving. And then someone recommends him to Uganda, and we hire him, and now he has a full salary for their standard of living. He is so thrilled, and we are so thrilled. He can't possibly be more thrilled than we are, because he's such a good leader and humble and bold and kind and smart. Just everything that you would want, So that was Vincent. So when I first went over with my friend Dennis from California, I'd been to that area a number of times because I'd helped start an orphanage back in 2006 and been many times since then. And so I sort of felt like I had a lay of the land and said to our board that was just forming here in the U.S., here are 3 villages we could adopt. And so we had decided that and went over there, and then we hired Vincent, we hired 3 other people, and announced to them that we're going to go to these villages. And boy, it was really clear that they were wondering why they hadn't been involved in that decision. And it was so dumb of me not to think of that ahead of time, but it hit me then, and I'm like, maybe you guys have different recommendation, And Vincent just immediately said, could we adopt my home village of Sarakiambia? I said, sure, that's fine, let's do that. Well, then let's drive out there. I want to see it and meet the people and get the lay of the land. And he's like, well, there's a little problem. Oh, what's that? There's no road to that village. The only way to get there is to walk. I said, Vincent, our model is a mobile clinic. If there's no road, we can't take the clinic to them. He said, we can carry them on our heads. We can carry them on our backs. He said, we'll carry them there. And he said, if you'll adopt Sarakiambia, the government will put a road in there. He says, I have friends at the government. And I'm thinking, yeah, right, okay. But, hey, let's give it a flying leap. So Dennis and I walked with them into Sarakiambia and met the people and up and down these hills and muddy slopes and so on. And it must have been 2 months, 6 weeks, 2 months after we adopted it. Guess what? The government put a road in.
What I love about that story is that it underscores a few things that I know are core values for Uganda Run. One is that you have Ugandan staff.
Totally.
And also that you are curious, that you look for leaders, and that you invite their input. It's not an exported, we're here, we're going to save the day, let us tell you what we should all do. You're asking for their input and you're following their lead.
Yep.
Of course, you're bringing wisdom. You're not just hands off, but you're collaborative in the work that you're doing together. That's why I wanted to highlight the story of Vincent, because I know he's a key part of what you do in Uganda.
Yep.
Yeah.
When we first, just a little context to that, when we first started working in Uganda with the orphanage, we chose that place because of a missionary who had been in that part of the world since the 60s and had retired to Australia. And I can't tell that whole story now, but basically he recommended we go there, but he warned us. He said, if you do a ministry on your own, you'll get scammed. And he said, and this was tongue-in-cheek, but he said, there are 3 honest people in the country of Uganda, and they all work for me, and if you do it on your own, you'll get scammed. And so, we ended up building an orphanage next to his school and using his accountability and so on. But they told us, if you don't have a Westerner on site, they'll have mission drift, they'll fight, they'll, take your money, and they're dishonest and so on. And that has not been our experience. We stay in touch with them all the time, at least 3 times a week by Zoom, and we're touching base and listening and giving wild ideas that might work and praying with them. And they have and we tell them all the time, because it's so true, and we want them to never forget that you guys are the heroes of this story. We're only here to try and help you succeed. We know you want your villages to be better. We know you don't want people to die needlessly. We know that people need jobs and, need advice on whatever it is, alcohol recovery or domestic violence, and we're only here to help you. And they know we mean it. It's easy to say the words, but over time, we mean it with all our hearts.
I think it's a beautiful model of collaboration and facilitation. You're there to help them facilitate their path forward. It's not your path. It's not your solution. You are responding to needs, but you're there to help them facilitate the path forward. And that makes it stickier. That makes the solutions that you come up with together more durable. And that's a good way for people here to know that what you're doing is making a difference. It's a lasting impact in that way.
Yep.
So, all right, you mentioned some other things that you do, other components of the overall program. You mentioned alcohol recovery. You mentioned domestic violence prevention. I'm going to say again, tell me a story about what you're doing currently to speak to the domestic violence issue in Uganda.
Wow, this could go for a couple of hours.
Well, just pick one.
Well, our first story is Thomas, and he was in Sarakyambia, and Vincent and his wife don't live in that village anymore, but they live down on the Tarmac Road, but they go to church there. And so they still attend church in the little church that Vincent attended when he was a child. It's a mud and sticks church. So they were in church, and a woman came in with her boy, and she and the boy had been beaten. And the little boy's head was bloody. They send us pictures that are like, oh, terrible. And Vincent had just been talking to the men about collaborating with each other and with him to prevent domestic violence, and they called themselves the Mankind Club.
So that name, I've heard you say that name before. I didn't know they came up with that name.
Well, no, they didn't. But when they heard it, they loved it. Okay. And we actually used to call these groups Jeremiah 22 groups, because there's a passage that says the strong should protect the weak and so on. But when we heard Mankind, we're like, that fits better.
Yes.
So Vincent left church, and he got some of the guys. They went to Thomas's house and told him, you have to choose kindness, and if you do, we'll be your best friend. If you don't, we'll take you to the police station. And he didn't believe him, because this was brand new. Nobody had any track record. So anyway, he was not cooperative, and they put him on their back and took him to a police station. And they have a saying that they net people. When they put a net over someone, and they put him they took him to the police station. And in Uganda, the law says that anyone who is helping to prevent crimes is automatically deputized. So they appreciate this, because they don't have a budget to go out there. And so they put him in a cell, and he went to court and was sentenced to 6 months in prison. And while he was there, Vincent went to visit him, took him a Bible, he prayed with him, and he said, we love you, and we're sorry that you're here, but, you'll have another chance. When you get out, you can be kind. So he got out and decided to join the Mankind Club. He decided to go to church every week. He decided to be baptized. He decided that he was going to be a good husband. And I've been there several times since then, and he's just such a wonderful guy.
He's been transformed. And that's the ministry of presence again, right? Vincent could have said, wow, we took care of him. We got him, out of the picture. He's off in prison, kind of let him rot. But that's not what Vincent did. And that's part of the core values of your team and your ministry there is that ministry of presence. Yes, we've kind of interrupted the cycle. You have now time to go think about this. You're put in a place where you can be open to transformation. And here I am. I'm still a part of this with you. It wasn't just, round up the bad guys. It was, let's bring about transformation as God would have it. And so I'm here. I'm still with you. You have a second chance. Here's the word of God. That's going to bring transformation to you. Yep. It's a beautiful approach.
And of course, the wives are so thrilled.
Yeah.
I've met them. And when I was there in December, I asked, could I take a video of you telling your story, and they said yes, and they sat and smiled and held hands, and I have a video of them, and then he's carrying water for his wife, which men do not do. That's humiliating to a man. That's a woman's job.
That's really upside down.
And I said, could I video you doing that? And he's like, okay. So I have a video of him walking down to the river, filling his can.
That's great.
Walking back up through the village, and all the people, and they're not even flinching because he does this all the time. And we have approaching 600 of these stories now in the less than 2 years that we've been doing this, about a year and a half.
Well, I love the connection also. Sabrina said, I feel beautiful. I have a feeling that Thomas's wife would say, I feel beautiful now. He's collecting the water for us, and he's not beating me. I feel beautiful.
And I asked the little boy, how's your daddy? And he said, he's so nice.
He's part of mankind.
He's so nice. And this was the man who was beating him.
Yeah.
He's so nice. I gave the little boy a soccer ball. And anyway, it's thrilling to be part of that. And, even these men who have made this choice, and it's cultural. I mean, they almost all of them do it. Not all, but almost all of them do it. And it's cultural and accepted, but they know in their hearts it's wrong. They have to. And the women, of course, know it's wrong. The pain they go through, and you see posters in the government buildings, call this number if you've got a problem. And you call the number, and it's in Kampala, 8 hours away. Nobody can help anything. And so that's why we're so thrilled with what our team is doing there to change that reality.
You're changing culture.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it is longer lasting.
Yeah.
And the people around are witnesses to the story of Thomas and his wife and their son. And it can be inspiring. If he can do it, I can do it.
Yep.
I can be a part of this club.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's right.
It's great. So, okay, we've talked about medical clinics. We've talked about domestic violence prevention. I'm also really interested in your business pathway. You mentioned that earlier on. Tell me an example of how you're helping someone find a pathway to changing their economic experience.
Yes. The road that came from Fort Portal to Bundibujo was narrow and difficult. And now the government is paid to have it widened and paved, and it's easy to get there. And the road to get from poverty to prosperity has been so narrow and so difficult, and a few people have made it. They have a little bit of income, but the rest have no hope. And what we're hoping and praying to do and are doing is making that road wider and easier, so that anyone who is willing to work hard, willing to take advice, willing to delay gratification, willing to collaborate with others, over time, if you take this class and you get this coach and you have this business opportunity either to connect with something already going or to start something new, you can lift your family out of poverty. You can buy toilet paper. You can buy soap. You can send your kids to school. And there's so many people that have never thought beyond this afternoon, will I have anything to give my kids to eat tonight? They're just wondering, what will I do tomorrow? And, their whole pathway is just so short, and it's just survival. And that's what we want to change. And we are changing.
I've heard you talk about the life expectancy in Bundibugyo. Say something about that, because I know that your approach is comprehensive change, cultural change.
Well, there are no government statistics for the villages up in the hills. But one of the officers we talked to estimates life expectancy to be in the high 30s. And on one of our medical trips, a doctor from Yakima, Washington, treated a woman who had buried her husband and 8 children. And there's so much unnecessary death. And literally, when they have a scratch and it gets infected, it could be the end of the line, or they get a fever. And it's just, that's why we originally felt so compelled to start a medical work. And that was our intent when we started, is just do medical, just stop this nonsense of unnecessary death. So in the villages where we serve now, when our teams go in the morning, they go Monday through Thursday, and we have 10 villages every week. And they go in, the first thing they do is a devotional. Then they do a class on HIV prevention or prenatal care or nutrition or clean whatever it is. And then they triage and treat people. And in the villages where our team is serving now, we have seen life expectancy just soar. We don't have any unnecessary death anymore. We had a donor that gave us finances for 8,000 water filters. The water they drink is so disgusting. It's so terrible. That's all they have. I held up a water bottle one time, my water bottle, and I said, point on here, how much water do you normally drink in a day? And they looked at me like, what? And they finally pointed at the bottom. We don't really drink water.
It's not drinkable.
It's so bad. But they have to have some to cook and so on. But now we've put water systems into 3 villages, and so we've shortened the distance they have to carry, but we've given water filters for 8,000 people so they can drink pure water. So we're seeing life expectancy, and we don't have statistics to compare before and after. It's easier to do with things like domestic violence or alcohol, but people are not dying needlessly anymore.
And when they see that there's hope for a different life and a different pathway, then they start to ask, now what? Now what? And you're developing answers for that question. Now what?
Well, we want each person to share what they've received. And so there's always someone in need. And this is a whole nother podcast when we want to talk about the family agreement. But we're our attorney, a Ugandan attorney's developed for us a family agreement. And when we invest finances, these couples sign this agreement. And one of them is that they will adopt a widow in their village. And there's no social safety net. And these women get too old to carry their water, and they just die. And I wouldn't say no one cares, but they don't know what to do about it. And it's just part of the cycle of life to them. And so we're requiring them to adopt a widow, and that doesn't mean they have to bring her into their home, but it does mean that they have to choose a widow and then stay in touch with her. And she needs water, somebody brings her water. She needs food, and they put an arm around her, they care for her, and make sure she feels like she belongs to someone, because she does now.
I love the connection that I'm hearing to child sponsorship. So that's not something that you do. Arganda, you don't do child sponsorship, but you invite people to adopt a village with you. And what I love about what you just shared is that you're actually asking Ugandans to adopt each other.
Yes.
It's a flip of child sponsorship. We're not going to sponsor you take care of each other. You sponsor the widow. I think it's another example of ownership. You've transferred ownership.
Yeah. Anyway, it's fun to try new things, and Some of them work.
I know you have a lot of things that are working. It's really inspiring. And it's all connected to your bigger vision. I'd love to hear you just share a little bit about your bigger vision for Arganda.
Well, our mission is to ignite hope in the villages we serve so that eventually men, women, and children feel healthy and safe and happy. Mm-hmm. And when we go into a village for the first time, I don't think anyone would say they feel safe. Mm-mm. They don't feel happy. Mm-hmm. They don't have hope. But now that we've been working in the first 3 villages for a little over 6 years, things have changed, mm-hmm. and people realize that there is hope. They've seen people go away who were going to die from whatever condition they had, mm-hmm. or they were crippled. Now they come back. I mean, I was in a village recently, and I was taking a few photos, and some little boy tapped me on the shoulder, and I looked at him, and he was a boy that was completely crippled. When I met him, Vincent was carrying him to us, saying, "Do you think we can help this boy?" Well, now he's running around with his friends playing, and I gave him my camera and made sure he kept the strap around his neck and showed him how to take pictures, and he must have taken 500 pictures that afternoon, most of which were of the sky and the dirt and everything else. But, it was so wonderful to see. So they're seeing that happen, mm-hmm. and they realize things don't have to be this way. Mm-mm. And so there's a couple other things we haven't really started dealing with yet, but we're going to. Mm-hmm. And, one of them is that the government official told me in our last mission trip that last year 2,225 girls were forcibly raped in their district that they know of. And their district has about the same number, maybe fewer people than Vancouver, Washington, where I live. Can you imagine if that number was happening here? And no one's doing anything about it. So we're going to do something about that, and probably a similar model to the domestic violence, mm-hmm. Where we have volunteers in the villages. And this is another thing, and we'll unpack more at a mm-hmm. later time, but we were told when we started there that these people won't volunteer for anything. If you want them to help set up chairs, they're going to expect money. If you want them to help do anything, you have to pay them, but they won't volunteer. Well, we have over 100 volunteers now in our 10 villages called the Mankind Club and the Soul Sisters Club, and these people are joyfully, enthusiastically surrounding women who mm-hmm. are hurt and children and preventing mm-hmm. Domestic violence, and they're not asking for anything. Well, they asked for a T-shirt so they'd have some official identification, and of course that's a no-brainer. So we got them beautiful T-shirts, and then we bought them umbrellas and rubber boots and flashlights in case they have to go out at night or during a rainstorm. But they're willing to mm-hmm. do their part mm-hmm. if we just can help them.
Well, and you have a history now of staying with it. You're not just there for the short term. It's mm-hmm. the ministry of presence that we talked about. You've been there for many years now, and you're digging in, and you're consistent, and you're trustworthy. So they know that you are a collaborative partner who wants to bring health and safety and happiness and hope. And so I just commend that you're willing to take on something that might even be harder. But by God's grace, you have the potential to collaborate and to continue making durable change.
Yes.
So, well done and amen. So, Ron, before we conclude, how could someone get involved? What's the pathway? We've used that pathway term many times already today. What's the pathway for someone here to join you in this work?
Well, first is go to our website, ourganda.org. And second, and these aren't necessarily in chronological order, is give me a call. I have my personal cell phone on my Facebook page because I don't care if people call me. And I'm especially eager to hear from anyone who's interested in Arganda. So my number is 360-624-7271. Give me a call anytime, and I'll answer it unless I'm, on a hiking trail without a signal or something. So there are ways you can get involved. You can donate, and every dollar that you give goes to Uganda, okay? And sometime we'll talk about our overhead on this side of the ocean. It's like a lemonade stand. But and other ways you can get involved, you can volunteer, you can go on a mission trip with us. and take a ride across the ocean, you can tell a friend, check out this website. And so, yeah.
Lots of ways to get involved.
Yep.
I'm glad. I'm glad for that. And in this podcast, we'll keep telling stories so that you can bring Uganda here for those who can't go, because we want anybody who can to experience the change that God's allowing you to bring to the villages there. So thank you for your work.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy.